Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast. I'm your host, Rich Herrera. This is your podcast for all things food and pop culture. Thank you for tuning in. Just a reminder to follow me on socials at Rich Herrera and at Eat Your Content on all social media platforms and also anywhere you get your podcast. Make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button to make sure when new episodes come out. My next guest for today is a powerhouse in the culinary world. She is the CEO and founder of Feel Good Foodie, a vibrant brand that's all about making healthy cooking not just accessible, but exciting. She has a jaw-dropping 10 million followers across social media. She's a digital sensation that's taken her talents from Instagram to Good Morning America, Today Show, Live with Kelly and Ryan, and has been featured in People, Vogue, and the New York Times. That's not all. She's also a widely successful entrepreneur and best-selling cookbook author. Her debut cookbook, the Feel Good Foodie Cookbook, launched in May and is already winning hearts and minds in the kitchen. It has 125 simple, healthy recipes that beautifully blends the flavor of the Middle East and the comforts of the Midwest. It's all about finding joy in the process, and her enthusiasm is contagious. Please welcome to the podcast the incredible Yumna Jawad.
Thank you so much for having me, Rich.
Thank you. Thank you. Did I get the name right? I meant to ask you that before. Did I pronounce that
Absolutely.
correctly?
You totally did. Yes.
Okay, good, good. I was afraid I was going to trip all over that, so I'm glad I got that correct. So, thank you for coming on the pod. You are the CEO of a multi-million dollar media kind of recipe empire called Feel Good Foodie. You have a couple of entrepreneurial other things going on, but I want to talk a little bit about your early life and your cultural influences that kind of pave the way for you to be where you are today. You were born in Africa, and if I did my research correctly, you moved to Dearborn, Michigan at age 11. How did that experience, cultural background, influence your approach to food and cooking today? Because I moved from Michigan to Georgia, and that was a cultural shock. So I can't even imagine at 11, which is a pretty impressionable age, moving from Africa to Dearborn. What was that like, and how did that influence you?
Well, when we first moved here, it felt like a cultural shock to me because everything where we came from in a small village in Africa in Sefadu, Sierra Leone, was really just small, lots of mom and pop shops. And so everything, so walking into a grocery store in Dearborn, Michigan was just kind of like Disneyland to me, just seeing all the possibilities. And what's interesting is when we first started, we used to, when we first moved here, we used to only eat Lebanese cooked meals. And my mom slowly started to find all these little shortcuts in the grocery store. She's like, wow, hamburger helper. We can make hamburger, out of a box with pasta. And this is such a great invention. And so my mom started leaning into all of these little conveniences and, all these fast foods, if you will, or ready made almost foods from the grocery store. And so it was just interesting just kind of shifting away from that. And it didn't take too long for us to realize that those types of meals were not that healthy for us. And so my mom ended up kind of bridging the two worlds together, if you will, and taking the influences of our heritage and our background of cooking Lebanese recipes and just making them, applying them to the kind of recipes we wanted to eat here. So she would take something like spaghetti because we wanted to eat spaghetti now. We learned what spaghetti was and we wanted to have it every night, but she would basically switch it up a little bit by maybe adding some Mediterranean meatballs with that spaghetti. So it was really just very interesting just to see the two worlds colliding. And in the beginning, I think when I first came here, I was like, oh, I'm American now. I speak English now. And I was just really proud of just being in America and trying to assimilate as well as possible to the new culture and to my new home, and almost started to leave my Lebanese self behind until I got to high school, I think, and I started realizing, wait, I love who I am and I love my culture and I'm proud of this and I want to do more of this, and I want to make sure that I continue to speak Arabic, continue to cook, or learn to cook and eat the foods that we grew up eating. So yeah, I think it's that balance of trying to be an immigrant somewhere new that's super exciting, while eventually trying to balance that out with who I was and my heritage.
So you mentioned your mom was kind of a huge influence in cooking, both cooking from scratch and then assimilating to kind of the American way of doing things, and then finding a balance between the two, right? What did your childhood smell like? What kind of things stuck with you as an adult now of the smells that you had when you were a kid?
Well, we had a small kitchen growing up in Sierra Leone, and I just remember that anytime I was like walking near the kitchen or by, there was always just whiffs of like fresh parsley and fresh garlic. And those are, I would always like just be smelling. I would hear that knife just kind of cutting the parsley, and I would always hear a sizzle of garlic from the kitchen, garlic and onions and cilantro even. And the smells were very herby, like lots of herbs like cilantro and parsley, as I mentioned, but also some like sweet florals as well, like rose water, for example, because my mom, we didn't have a lot of bakeries there, and my mom would bake anything, like all of our birthday cakes and any kind of events that we had, everything was baked from scratch. And we do a lot of rose water, addition to the things that we bake, just to kind of sweeten them without adding any sugar. So I would describe it as, yeah, parsley, garlic, and rose water.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah.
Herby and floral. That's nice. That's
Herby and
nice.
floral and garlicky.
So you and I have a little bit of things in common. You went to the University of Michigan. I'm a Michigan fan. I actually grew up in Saginaw,
Oh,
Michigan,
cool.
for a while, and you got a degree in business and marketing, and you spent 10 years there before transitioning to starting Feel Good Foodie. What were the challenges that you faced transitioning, and what kind of sparked that transition from the corporate world to a self-made entrepreneur?
So I went to the University of Michigan Business School, and while I was at the business school, I studied, all parts of business, and I really just enjoyed marketing and corporate strategy the most. And so I thought, graduating from college, I thought I'm going to become a chief marketing officer of a huge, Forbes 100 CPG company, and that was my goal graduating from college. And so I set out a path to basically learn all the different aspects of marketing. And I was actually pretty strategic in how I did that. I first got this management training program that where it was basically selling CDs, but I got to learn like all the different aspects of that business, including being in a Walmart store and learning about packaging and merchandising and consumer retail. And then I moved into different roles of doing consumer research, which was really interesting because it basically helps to guide the decisions that affect everything that happens in stores. And then I also moved to the other side where I was working in advertising and doing consumer brochures and doing marketing from a selling perspective. And so I had a chance to basically have lots of different positions in marketing. And I remember after about 9 or 10 years having my son and going on maternity leave. And when I came back from maternity leave, the company that I was working for, it was a research company, and I was a senior market research analyst at the time. And so they started giving me less and less work. They were okay with me working from home, but it was less and less projects. And I was okay with that because I was working 20 hours a week, had really fulfilling projects that were interesting, and I was still making money and helping to support my husband, who was also just kind of starting his career as a resident and barely making anything, working 100 hours a week at the hospital, like
Right,
barely
right.
making anything. And so we were a young family. We needed the dual income. And so I was doing that. And at the same time, I was also a little bit bored because I felt like I'm used to working 40 hours a week. And so I took up this hobby of learning how to cook more for my family and just learning how to cook also for the fun of it. And I decided to learn how to cook publicly on Instagram. And when I started doing that, it was a blast. I mean, I met all kinds of people. I learned all kinds of new recipes. I feel like I got healthier in the process of it as well. And it was really interesting because I started to meet people who were saying, yeah, I think you can actually make a living out of doing this. But this was 2013, where we didn't have sponsored content, we didn't have influencers, and we didn't really know about ad revenue on websites. And I didn't really understand how I could make revenue, but I kind of just stuck with it for the fun of it and thought maybe something will become of it. Maybe Food Network will discover me and I'll have my show one day. And that's kind of how I was thinking of it. I never thought of it as influencers. I thought of it always still like in a traditional sense of marketing as going and having a show on the Food Network, or you know and ending up writing for a magazine. And it was just a very traditional way of thinking of it, even though what I was doing was digital marketing, cutting edge, new type of marketing, if you will. But it's still, I was using this new type and still thinking of it helping me with old types of marketing, if you will, or old types of entertainment. So I kept at it, and it was interesting because when I first started, I didn't make a single dollar for a whole year. And then something happened after a year where a brand decided to send me free yogurt, and then another one sent me free crackers, and then
Oh,
someone
wow.
sent me free pasta. And I thought, hey, this is great. It's like I felt like I was winning the lottery. And then after that, after a few months of just getting free product, I started getting some nominal payments, like $50 here, $100 there. And in the beginning, it was enough to just pay for groceries. And then pretty soon it just kept growing. It was more brands. People started seeing my videos, or not even videos at the time. It was photos of, I was using like a milk brand, for example, and showing
Hmm.
how I use them in a baking recipe, or using pasta to make something that, I grew up making. And it wasn't until about 2 years after that where I actually started making good enough money where I thought this actually exceeds the income that I was making as a senior market research analyst. And actually, I'm kind of enjoying this a lot more, and I don't need that part-time job. So that's when I made the leap into actually working on Feel Good Foodie. But I still did that for probably 2 to 3 years on the side, thinking like, oh, this is just kind of like a fun thing. I'm making good money. I'm having fun. And then one day when my kids go back to school, I'll get a real job. I'll get my real job. And 3 years later, I realized this is my real job.
Yeah, I mean, it just really took off. You gained all those skills from learning how to market in the corporate world and turn them onto yourself,
Yes.
and marketing for yourself and marketing your brand. Uh, so a lot of the things that you learned along the way really transitioned well into Feel Good Foodie, because I stalked your Instagram, I looked at your website, and it is very um, it's very easy to look at the videos, very easy to follow, and you have a specific way of doing those cooking videos that everyone knows what to expect when they go onto your Instagram or their TikTok, and you're going to get a quick recipe, and all the information is right there, and it looks really good. And you were kind of on, like you said, 2012, 2013, kind of at the beginning of the social media monetization boom. I mean, now it's hard to kind of break in now, but in 2012, 2013, it was a rare breed, and you really took advantage of that kind of hole in the marketplace, and really made a name for yourself. It looks really good. So good job with
Yeah.
that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So what was the initial vision for Feel Good Foodie when you first started the blog and the website? Was it just a repository of recipes that you could hold on to from your family, or what was the initial thinking behind that?
So when I first started, I wanted to learn more about nutrition and about cooking. And I wanted to learn about how food can feel functional while still tasting good.
Hmm.
And so I kind of approached it more in the beginning as me learning why these foods are good for us. Like, why do we eat strawberries, and why is milk good for us, and why is quinoa good for us? And so if you go way back to the first post of Feel Good Foodie, it's really hard to scroll that far back on Instagram. But when you go way back, the initial posts were of me showing a recipe that I made or I tried. And most of them were just, something from the internet that I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Or I would take my mom's like tabbouleh recipe, and instead of using bulgur, which is what's commonly used in tabbouleh, I used quinoa. And so I would mention, hey, I just made my mom's tabbouleh recipe. And did you know, and I used quinoa. Did you know that quinoa is the only, you know, plant-based food that has all 6 or 7 protein amino acids, whatever it was, some kind of thing that I would mention about quinoa. And I would call it a feel good fact. And so I basically would show up like 3 to 4 times a week with some kind of a feel good food and a feel good fact to go with that. And so even I would share like eggs. Oh, did you know eggs have vitamin E in them? And vitamin E is actually really good for your skin. And what I found was that people did not care about any of the things that I was sharing, but they cared about the recipes that I wasn't sharing. Just I was sharing a photo of the food, and I thought that, nobody wants the recipe because the internet is full of all kinds of recipes and
Mm.
people have recipes from their family. But it turns out that people wanted my recipes. And so it took me a couple months to actually figure it out, because every time I would share a photo, people would say, well, wait, what's the recipe actually? Or and it was interesting to me because it was simple things like how to make oatmeal. And now if you Google how to make oatmeal, Feel Good Foodie is the number one search result for that term, which is really
Wow.
interesting because when I first shared that, people were like, how do you make oatmeal? I'm like, do you really not know how to make oatmeal? And to me, I was like, it's on the packet. It says for
Right.
a cup of this, and they're like, but yours looks creamy. I'm like, yeah, because I added a splash of milk. And so to me, it felt like growing up with a mom who cooked all of our meals home cooked because we lived in a small town with like one or two restaurants.
Hmm.
We had no other choice. I felt like, well, my mom always made breakfast, lunch, and dinner for us, and making oatmeal is just something that's like easy and common. And but it turns out that people just didn't want recipes. They wanted recipes from somebody that they resonated with and somebody that they actually felt they could see themselves in. And so they looked at me, oh, she's, young 30 something mom, barely has any time in her hands, and look at this beautiful meal that she put together and it sounds easy. I want to make that. And so it was the accessibility of it and also just the ease of the recipes that got people's attention. And I had to let go of feel good facts because nobody cared about them.
Nobody cares where quinoa comes from. They just want to see
Nobody
what you did with
cares.
it.
Exactly. Nobody cares where it comes from, what it does. And I only started on Instagram in the beginning. And what was interesting is I always thought that blogs were dead. In 2013, I was like, nobody reads blogs anymore. That's like so old. It's like a thing that people did in the early 2000s. And this is it. Instagram, and Instagram was only about 3 years old at that point. I'm like, Instagram is the new blog. It's like a
Mm.
mini blog. And this is where everything is. And I would actually put my recipes in my caption at the time. And it wasn't until 2016, so more than 3 years later, where I finally decided to actually start a website. And the reason I started the website was because at that point I had probably hundreds of recipes on Instagram after 3 years of posting 3 to 4 times a week. I had
Hmm.
hundreds of them, and people couldn't find. They're like, remember that one time you shared this one recipe with like salmon and it had tomatoes in it? And I'm like, what? I don't remember. Like, and so I decided to actually put them on a website so that it was easier for me to like send people to them instead of scrolling. And it was just easier for them to find it too if they were looking for them. And I started hearing that you can actually make money on a website. And in fact, blogs were not dead. And so the other thing too was that it was a great way to diversify because
Hmm.
I had a little bit of a scare in 2015 where I lost my Instagram account for
Ooh.
like 15 hours or so. Like it was literally gone at night and came back the next morning, like mid morning. But it was just such a scare to know that, wow, I worked so hard and I had 200,000 followers and they were all gone that
Wow.
morning. And so I was like, that's it. We're starting the website. This is what we need to do. It's easier to find recipes. It's good for diversification. And maybe I can make money one day on the website.
Wow.
And all those
Wow.
things are true today. It's great for diversification because we see the potential of TikTok going away.
Yeah.
It's so easy for people to find my recipes because now I'm at 1,450 recipes. There's no
Wow.
way people can find them on Instagram. And I'm able to make money on the website through third party advertising on there.
Yeah, I think a lot of people learned a lesson with the TikTok outage that was out for 12 hours. And they're
Yes.
like, oh, okay, now I know that I have no control over the social sites. I may have a following of a million people, but tomorrow gone. And I
It
need
could
to
be
know
gone.
that I can retain some of those followers in another way. And you did that through the website. So very smart advice. Very smart advice.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it was like, thank God for that little scare that got
Yeah.
me to do that. Because now people have that similar scare, with TikTok.
Right, right. So speaking of followers, today you have 10 million followers across all social media platforms, but every influencer started with zero. Was there a particular recipe or a post that blew up that because the first 100 followers is the grind, right? And then after that, you might gain some momentum. But was there a post or a recipe that you posted that blew up in some way that got you to the million, and then after that it was just like a snowball, just kept gaining more and more followers? Do you remember that moment, and were you excited
Yeah.
when you saw that?
Yeah, I would say there's two moments because one of them was, and they're both video. And I think that it was really hard before for photos to make you really go viral. And it was hard for new accounts to go viral, so it was kind of like a slow and steady climb. And we didn't really see things going viral the way we do today. But when video first started on Instagram, I want to say it was like 2017 or 18. I was one of the first people to actually share food videos, and there weren't a lot of accounts doing that at the time, so there wasn't a lot of competition, and it was the kind of food videos that were like BuzzFeed style videos. So
Mhm.
BuzzFeed and like those kind of big sites like they were the ones sharing those videos and Food Network, but creators really weren't doing that because they all thought that you need a fancy camera and to do all of this. And so I found a way to do it. And I actually hired a videographer back in 2017 to help me with that. And the first one that went viral was like a one pan pasta. And I started the video with just like holding raw pasta, like spaghetti in my hand and dropping them into this pan and then just dropping everything else on top of it, like tomato paste and water and veggies and onions. And people were like, what's happening? Like, why is everything going like why is everything going on top of the pasta? And how is this happening? And it was basically a Martha Stewart recipe of a one pan pasta where you basically put the pasta, the water, and all the veggies, and you bake it all together. And after about 45 minutes in the oven, beautiful baked pasta dish. And people loved it. The moms loved it. And then the really true hardcore Italians hated it. And I think it was this just like love hate passionate thing. And I was like, I didn't even come up with this idea. It's like a Martha Stewart idea, but just decided to share it in a fun, different way that resonated with so many people, but was hated by so many people. And so that's when I started really learning. I mean, I always knew too, as like with my marketing background, that if you create something that people talk about, doesn't matter if it's good or bad, there's potential for it to, explode in the marketing world. And so with something like this, you had the good and the bad. It wasn't all bad, thankfully. It was like there was enough good in there. So that was really, really exciting to see that. And I feel like my account like grew within a week, like 100,000 followers. And I was like, whoa. And, and then I learned from that to like, okay, how else can I surprise people with like a really cool start to the video and something else that's surprising, but in a recipe that still works really well. And I kept at it and had some really monumental growth in like 2018 and 2019 with video exploding. And then especially when TikTok started, my second big moment was baked feta pasta. So that was, a huge thing that like Vogue even called me to talk to me about. And it was just, this recipe, again, it wasn't my recipe. It was just a recipe that I had seen before and people had shared it before, but I had this ability to make something go viral with the way I introduced it. And the way I introduced it was, I went on TikTok and I did a video where I said, because of this recipe, the grocery stores in Finland ran out of feta cheese. And people are like, what? What do you like? What is this? Like, and so it's just this like way to grab attention 4 years ago that we weren't seeing enough of. We weren't seeing as many people doing that. And then I proceeded with a recipe that was so different because we had never seen feta used as a sauce before, mixed with pasta, garlic, basil, and tomato. Very basic ingredients that a lot of
Mhm.
people have or can easily get at the grocery store. And I think it was how basic the ingredients were with how amazing the results were that really made it take off. So both times pasta. So pasta is good. People love the pasta with me.
So the baked feta one is it's one of those I remember when that was going viral around that time, and it's one of those recipes where you're like, "Why didn't I think of that?" Like, it's
Yeah,
so simple and so easy, and it's
right.
like, why didn't I?" And then the story you told about the pasta where the people moms loved it, but the hardcore Italians hated it. Look, a hate view is still a view, right? So, in fact,
Oh
subscribe
yeah.
so you can continue to hate watch and all that on there. So, uh,
Exactly. And the thing is, they were sending it to their like grandmas and their brothers and moms, and like, look how terrible this idea is. But every
look at
time they
this
sent it to
dummy.
somebody, I was like, hey, it's getting shared, it's getting like extra views, which is
That's right.
great.
That's right. No such thing as bad press, right? In that
No.
sense. So I want to dip into your entrepreneurial ventures outside of Feel Good Foodie. So you have a brand called Oath Oats. That's somewhat connected to Feel Good Foodie. Overnight Oats. It's a packaged overnight oats program. So you launched that one. What were some lessons that you learned on launching a kind of a product based business versus like the recipe blog and kind of more of a service? What are some of the key differences there that you had to tackle?
Well, I think when it comes to a consumer packaged good, I think you can't grow too fast. I think you have to grow slow and steady, which is much more different than growing as an influencer. There was a lot of influencers during and I did grow pretty slow, but I had some big boom moments. And as an influencer, if you grow from 100,000 followers to a million followers the next day, that's great. It's wonderful. You get extra press. It's great. And you just have to, nothing really changes too much with your day to day. You just have to maybe make some more videos. You might have more, work with sponsors, but it's manageable and you can turn things down and whatnot. Um, when it comes to a product, it's really hard and it's really not advised. And I didn't know this before to grow too quickly. So I launched Oath Oats 2 years ago, and I went to a trade show a year ago, and we had like 6, 7 contacts from buyers who were like, "I love this. I want this in the store. Let's get it in there. Let's get it in there." And I was so excited. I was like, great, we're going to be in like 7,000 stores tomorrow. This is wonderful. And, and it was hard because, I had a business partner who was like, whoa, no, we can't do that. And we need to start with just one. And so we had to pick the smallest one to basically start with and
Mm,
test it out and just to see how things go. And that was a huge new learning for me too, just to see that. And it's not easy getting into that first one either. Everything is so much slower in that world, it seems, because it's just dealing with real merchandise. There's
hmm.
expiration dates, there's like limitations, there's quotas you have to meet, there's marketing expectations. And so it was just another world altogether where you have to be very strategic and you have to just kind of take it just one small thing at a time instead of just and trying to explode everywhere all at once. So that was one of the biggest learnings for me, is just taking it slow and steady. And I look at Oath Oats today, 2 years later, and I feel like, man, it's just not doing anything. It's slow. And I am just like, goodness. And the marketer in me wants to just like go out with a bang and spend all this money and do all the
Right.
things. But I have to remind myself that it can actually hurt the brand to do that, because it could, as fast as it goes up, it can come down. And something that's slow and steady, you test it, you prove it, you improve slow by slowly, is the way to go.
Not a sprint, it's a marathon, right?
It is, exactly. It's
Yep.
definitely just a marathon and very different from being an influencer.
Yeah, yeah. So speaking of influencing, you were able to harness that and partner with Home Chef recently. So
Yes.
tell me a little bit about that collaboration. How did that come about? Home Chef is a huge brand where people can order a meal and have it shipped directly to them with all the ingredients already pre-portioned out, and all they do is follow the recipe card, almost idiot proof. So how did that collaboration come about, and how's that going so far?
Well, they had reached out to me, and that's the great thing about having the presence on multiple channels and having just the coverage that I have with my brand, is that they found me and they reached out to me. And I think that they were looking for somebody that could do some Mediterranean meals. And they had never had a collaboration before with anyone who can do Mediterranean meals. And the Mediterranean diet is getting so much more attention lately that I was just the perfect person to, speak on behalf of it, especially with my cookbook launching around the same time. So we basically decided to work together. And what was interesting about it was that I had limitations working with them. Like, the recipes had to be not just made in 30 minutes, but like done in 30 minutes. And so, everything, it wasn't just like prep and all of that. Like, so there was certain limitations of like how fast things can get done, how many ingredients, how many of them were fresh versus, shelf stable, and all the things like that. And so, but it was really exciting and a really cool way for me to get creative and take the recipes that people loved on my website and try to tweak them a little bit, modify them, and make them even better with Home Chef, and in a way that they taste good. They're made in such a convenient time, and they're delivered to their home. So it was such a great partnership, and we ran 4 weeks of 8 of my meals, and so every week you can pick two of the meals, and it just ended at the end of January, actually.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's,
So
yeah, it
your
was
recipes
really,
aren't available anymore on there.
they're no longer available. Exactly. And
Oh,
so
oh no.
what's interesting about it is that because Home Chef is constantly, rotating menus,
Yeah.
there's always something new. So if you have an account with Home Chef for 52 weeks, you will have 52 weeks of different recipes to select from all year long. I think they might have some of their classics that they repeat here and there, but
Yeah.
um the ones that they work with influencers, they're, and there's probably like a handful of influencers they've worked with. And I was fortunate enough to be one of those. And yeah, and so the meals were limited time only.
Oh, okay, okay. So I can feel better saying this then because I used Home Chef in the past when I was learning to cook, and then I realized I was learning to cook, and then I was like, because Home Chef, I mean, for the ingredients, it can be a little pricey over time, right? And then I
Yeah,
realized I can buy these ingredients. I can just follow the recipe card, buy the ingredients at the store, and I kind of learned my way out of Home Chef in that sense.
right.
And it's kind of like your customers are doing that in a sense. So I thought that was a really interesting business model. Seems to work for them. There's always new cooks coming in, new
Absolutely.
home chefs coming in, and
And I did that too when I first started too. And I look at myself, and I always look at the people who follow me as Yumna 5 years ago, for example, or Yumna 10
right.
years ago, or like previous version of me. And when I first started, when I first got married, when I first had kids, when I was first learning how to cook, and what are some of the things that were helpful to me at that time. I want to know your top 10 tools of your must-have kitchen gadgets. Like that's really helpful for Yumna 10 years ago, or having a home chef meal where it's like you have meals from somebody that you know and trust, but I don't have time to grocery shop and I just want it to be easy for me and in a convenient way.
Mm,
And I actually had done some of those myself when I first started to cook as well. And it was great because it taught me new techniques that I
hmm.
probably wouldn't have sought out myself. Like you might look for a lasagna recipe and you might look for a taco recipe, but for mine, one of them was like a hummus crusted baked chicken. Like you would never think to like do
Right.
something like that. But after making a recipe like that, you can learn that, hey, I can actually use hummus to create a crust around chicken. Like that's really cool and different. And it's added protein to the chicken, for example.
Right.
So I
Right.
love it for that reason too, of just expanding your wheelhouse of the type of recipes and techniques that you know.
Yeah, I learned a lot from Home Chef, so I'm not knocking it.
Yeah,
I just,
it's really cool. Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
I
Yeah.
just
But you're right. It
learned my
does.
way out of it.
Yeah, because after a while, you're like, okay, well, I get how they do this, and now I can probably do it on my own. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
it's interesting.
So let's talk about why you're actually here 30 minutes later. Your cookbook just launched. And so congratulations on that. This is your first cookbook. So walk me through the process of what it was like developing a cookbook when, you have recipes that sometimes maybe you don't measure things out because you just kind of do things on the fly and you taste and it tastes fine but you don't know how much you put in there. So having to put all of that to pen to paper and putting it in a book, what was that process like, and how long did it take, and getting all that together?
Yeah. So I'm lucky because I did have the experience of having the website before launching the cookbook. So I've had the
Mm.
website since 2016, and so I've had to actually put measurements of salt and pepper, and I had to find out from my mom, for example, on some of these authentic recipes, how she makes them, and really try to figure out what measurements work the best for the best flavor of recipes. So I had some of that experience, which really helped me. But I think that, as a recipe developer, you're still tested, when you do a cookbook, because the cookbook just feels so much more official because it's all getting printed. And so
Hmm.
that process of it was really nerve-wracking because I signed a deal to do the cookbook in 2021. Was it 2020? I think it was, and the end of 2020. Yeah, at the December 2020, and I knew that the book was not coming out until May 2024. I knew it was going to be
Oh,
spring
wow.
2024. So you have to think about, okay, what are people going to be making in 3 years? Because, not only are you like going through 1 year of just developing and testing recipes, but then there's a whole nother year of just the book getting edited, photography getting done, the book getting printed. So it is a good 2.5 year process before it's out to the public. And so there's that pressure of trying to find recipes that feel evergreen, and feel really flavorful, but also feel like easy enough where I like them today and I like them then as well. So I basically ended up picking a theme of the type of recipes I wanted to do. And I decided to make everyday recipes. It's 125 everyday recipes that are elevated with Mediterranean ingredients. And so I picked 8 Mediterranean ingredients that I feel like They all have a long shelf life. They're all easy to find. You can literally can find all of them on Amazon, except for Lebne, which is like a yogurt cheese. But that even has a pretty decent shelf life. You can usually find it at most grocery stores.
Hmm.
And I just decided to take everyday recipes and try to see how we can take these ingredients and, elevate them. So, I didn't get too crazy with the recipes. I might have a baked chicken recipe, but for example, using some yogurt on it to just make it more tender, make it more juicy, and add a little bit of tang to that recipe, which was really unexpected and interesting. Or adding tahini to banana bread instead of half the butter.
Oh, wow.
So I made it, yeah. And so I didn't have to start completely from scratch. I had recipes on my website that I knew and loved. I'm like, well, I have a lot of banana bread recipes, so let's do another banana bread because this feels like if it's an everyday cookbook, it should have the basic things like baked chicken and banana bread and oatmeal. But let's do a different flavor. Let's,
Hmm.
tweak that a little bit. So that's what I concentrated on. It's, basic recipes, but they just have these different unique flavors. So it teaches people to experiment with ingredients in an unexpected way. But it's not scary because if you don't have rose water, you can just put vanilla extract. If you don't have tahini, you can just use olive oil, for example. And so with every one of these eight, flavor boosters, there's always a substitute for it.
Yeah.
Except for dates. Well, dates you can do because I blend dates, but you could do raisins actually. There is a substitute for all of them. I was like, dates maybe not, but there literally is a substitute for all of them.
Yeah. So somebody that's been following you from the beginning and has your website as bookmark number one on their favorites, what can they expect out of the cookbook that's different or a different experience than what they would get from the website?
So the website feels like everyday types of recipes that is a lot of healthy American recipes. Like you'll find in there like air fryer sweet potatoes. You'll find like ground beef tacos, just, a broad range of healthy-ish recipes. So everything that I do, I just add a little bit of a healthy-ish twist to it. But you also find some really authentic Lebanese recipes, like how to make stuffed cabbage rolls, for example, or how to make baklava from scratch. So having some of those recipes, it's just very broad on the website where you're
Hmm.
getting some, simple Mediterranean recipes, some like really authentic Lebanese ones, and just a lot of everyday American recipes that are just a little bit healthier, like by using Greek yogurt instead of mayonnaise and things like that. When it comes to the cookbook, it truly feels more like a package deal. And the way it's kind of feels more like a package is because all the recipes are kind of intertwined through these eight Mediterranean staples. So everything is Mediterranean, or Mediterranean influence, and everything is going to have a feel good ingredient to it. It's going to be super colorful. It's going to kind of fit through this lifestyle, and they all work together. Like, especially whenever I have dinner parties, I'll just grab my book and like the seafood chapter works with the meal, with the meat chapter, with the sides, and even the desserts. They all just kind of all the flavors really complement each other, so it
Right.
feels more thematic. And it just feels more like a comprehensive, like one chapter of my whole website. But actually, 100 of the 125 recipes are brand new,
Oh,
and
okay.
they're not on the website. But it's like things like tahini banana bread, where it's banana bread. I have banana breads on the website, but not the tahini version. So yeah,
Right.
100 of them are brand new and people cannot get them on the website.
Oh, interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
So the cookbook launches, and of course, with any popular influencer with a cookbook, you got to do the media tour, right? And you got to do
Yeah.
the grind, got to get
Yes.
out there and promote the thing. So I was doing some research on you, and I was watching these cooking segments, and cooking segments in general for me on morning shows are just stress inducing because I'm feeling for you food chefs, cooks, influencers trying to cram like five recipes in 3 minutes. Like, what does that feel like the first time you had to go out there and do that and try to cram all this stuff in 3 minutes? How stress inducing was that? Trying, okay, you got to do this, and the end product is this. On to the next one.
Oh my gosh, it is. And they'll warn you. It's like, okay, five recipes, and like Good Morning America. I was on Good Morning America, and we had a Mother's Day theme because my cookbook came out right before Mother's Day. And so we had a Mother's Day theme, and it was 5 breakfast recipes. And so they tell you, oh, the segment's going to be 3.5 minutes. I'm like, three and a half divided by five. I'm doing the math. I'm like, okay, so intro, conclusion, that leaves me about like 15 seconds for each one. And you try to
Wow.
think of the things to say for each one. But then you also want to show action, right? You don't want to just point at things, because pointing at things can be kind of boring. So you're stirring some things, you're pouring, and you try to chop a little bit, but it goes by so quickly, and it just feels so rushed. And what ends up happening is like they just kind of start walking towards you, and you're like, oh, I gotta move. And it's time to move to the next one. But it's super exciting. It's really fun, and I find that I was able to prepare for them by just trying to think of one thing to say about that recipe and try not to overwhelm myself. So I was like, okay, it's one action and one thing to say about it. Move on. One action and one thing to say about it. And I think by my seventh one, I became a pro, and I was like, I got this. I can do this. And I think what helped me too is that I had been going on other shows, more local shows before that,
Hmm.
which really helped me prepare for it. I was actually on the Kelly and Ryan show for the first time in February 2020, and I made a soup recipe. And it was nice because it was 4 minutes for one soup recipe, and it felt like that felt rushed to me at the time, but building onto that from 2020 all the way to doing the media tour in 2024, I felt like, okay, I'm prepared for this. I have the expectations, and you just got to keep your eyes on the producer because they'll
Yeah.
be like, move along, and like I learned who to look at, because you want to look at the host, but you have to still look at the host, but in the corner of your eye, you always have to be looking at the producer, because they will tell you to zip it or continue,
That's
continue elaborating on that point.
Man, that stressed me out just listening to that. I think it's funny
Yeah.
that you mentioned Good Morning America because that was one of the ones I was actually going to talk about a little bit. The fruit salad segment, I thought unintentionally hilarious because you're explaining the fruit salad like, yeah, my mom will put a little vanilla extract and some rose water, and you and I know rose water little goes a long way, and the poor host pours about a gallon of rose water in the fruit salad, and I'm like, I would not want to eat that one right now.
I don't know if you saw my face. I have to look back at the segment, but I don't know. I was like, oh, and
Oh,
in my like deep down, I was exactly like, we know how it is with rose water. My mom literally measures using the cap of the bottle
yeah.
is how we measure rose water. And I think the cap is about a teaspoon, but that's how we pour into that cap. And that's literally how much we put. And I think I had used a professional stylist who put rose water in probably like a 2 cup measuring,
Yeah, it was in a big old cup, and I'm like, "What are you
container.
doing?"
She pours it into it. And so it's funny because backstage, everybody eats everything and all the food is really good and it's not overly styled or touched or
Right.
maneuvered or anything like that. And so people were like digging in. I was like, do not eat the fruit salad. Rinse it out first with some water, get all of that out there, because otherwise, I mean, it's just so strong and so
Yeah,
floral.
yeah.
But I laughed so much deep down inside. It was like, and it was such a beautiful big bowl of fruit salad. I was like, please don't let that go to waste. Can we rinse it and just eat it? It's just a little bit too much rose water.
Yeah, I saw her pour that in, I was like, "Oh, oh, no." And you were so graceful, you're like, "Well, I didn't tell you how much to put in."
Yeah,
At the
it's my fault actually.
So, that was funny, that was funny.
Yeah.
So, what does the future hold for Feel Good Foodie, Oath Oats, any other partnerships? I want to take the last few minutes here and just roll out the red carpet for you. Let you promote whatever you need to promote, want to promote. Where can people find the cookbook? Where can people find you on social media? What's the website? All of that.
Thank you. Well, the cookbook became a national bestseller within a week, which I was super proud of. And it's really cool to still see that the cookbook is doing really well on Amazon and local bookstores. And I'm still actually personalizing and signing cookbooks. So it's definitely a really cool gift for anybody who's trying to eat more Mediterranean meals or who just loves to cook. And it's really fun to see the cookbook doing so well. As far as the website, it continues to grow every single year. And every year we exceed the growth from the previous year. So I want to continue to build that out and really create a food media site that houses all kinds of not just recipes, but tips and tools to really help the home chef navigate through what's for dinner and what's for lunch and breakfast and snacks and dessert and everything in between, and really make them feel like they have a resource and a friend when it comes to making recipes. And I want to always demystify anything that we feel, feels overwhelming. Because I know when I used to watch my mom cook, I was just overwhelmed by the things that she would do, making, yogurt from scratch and making tomato paste from scratch. And I want the home cook today not to feel so overwhelmed by any of that, and to really feel like home cooking is something that they could whip up when they come home from, a busy day at work. So I want the website to continue to do that. And then I really want Oath Oats also to continue to grow. I mean, we're still such a baby company, and I want to see that in more stores. I want to, reach out to those 7 contacts eventually and get it in all of those stores and get it into thousands of stores nationwide, and really become, have the name kind of become a staple breakfast commodity, the way you have Cheerios, for example. Like, that's my
Hmm.
overarching huge goal for Oath Oats, is to really just have it be a big champion for breakfast for people who are looking for something convenient and tasty and easy. So I think it really delivers on that, and it feels like an overall, like, it fits my overall package for Feel Good Foodie and what I'm trying to promote as well, because I just want people to eat more at home, whatever that means. Even if it's like, the ingredients are delivered to you like it is for Home Chef, the ingredients come to you in a package like it is for Oath Oats, or you're getting your own ingredients and hopping on the website. I want you to cook at home and feel empowered to do more of that. And I hope that, more of my followers and more people who find me have a chance to do more of that. So yeah, I feel like I'm going to be, I'm in my early 40s. I think I'm going to be making TikTok videos and food videos until I'm in my 50s, because I just love it so much and I enjoy it so much. And I just want to continue to see the brand grow and thrive. And
Yep.
you can find me everywhere as Feel Good Foodie. I actually personally respond to all my DMs. If you listen to this podcast, I'd love to hear from you and what you took away from it. I respond to all of those and respond to all my comments on my website and on all social media. It's a lot of work, but that's how I keep in touch with my community and just keep a pulse on what matters to people.
And the Feel Good Foodie Cookbook available anywhere you get books, on Amazon and local bookstores as well, right?
Absolutely.
Excellent, excellent. Yumna, Jawad, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. It was a joy and an honor talking to you today. Looking forward to what comes next for you, and I'm definitely going to try to find that tahini banana bread recipe, because that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's so good.
Thank you for your time, and I appreciate you coming on the pod.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Eat Your Content. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the podcast through my merch store on TeePublic. Get great quality items like t-shirts, hats, mugs, and more, all sporting the vibrant Eat Your Content logo. Go to teepublic.com/user/eatyourcontent for more great items, and thanks for your support.